Hi everyone, I'm Nigel from IBM Blockchain, and I'll be going through some ways that blockchain is transforming industries and reinventing businesses. So some of the use cases and also how it's all themed. So blockchain is creating value and opening new markets. I think we've been hearing about troughs of disillusionment, or that there are certain clients that may not necessarily be interested anymore in blockchain. Well, we actually conducted a survey with 1,600 executives from 8 industries, and the resounding response that we're getting is that early adopters for blockchain is really interested in having networks in production this year. In fact, over half of our C-suite respondents really believe that the sharing economy, blockchain-based platform models, is going to reshape their businesses. And then about 1/3 is reallocating massive amount of capital, estimated $1.2 trillion, to launch these new platforms. So why are they doing this? I think it goes back to basics. When you think about blockchain, as most of us know, 3 key properties here. We have distribution, it's distributed, it's digital, and of course, it's immutable. But for me and our colleagues, it's where these parts intersect that really make it interesting. Of course, when you have something that's distributed and digital, you have the efficiency. When something is distributed, so distributed and you can't change it, you have the trust. And then when something's immutable and digital, you have that transparency. And so this is something I've been talking about for a little while now, and I've always neglected the little middle part. And I think it's the middle part that's the most fascinating, and the reason I'm here today. It's to talk about the shared truth. And the reason that all these business models are being transformed is because we now have the ability to share truth. And one of the things that we are very fortunate to have at IBM is we get an interesting vantage point. We get to see hundreds of different use cases and deployments that our clients are working on, and we are partnering with them on. So we're doing things across multiple industries, but we have the full stack. We have the technology piece that we're working on. You heard some of that today and also yesterday. But we also have services with consultants and subject matter experts, and we have networks that we're deploying. So we're used to convening these networks. And so it's looking across our entire portfolio. What we did is started thinking about what are some of the converging themes? Where is blockchain really adding a lot of the value if we are able to break it down into particular themes? And my team, we came up with 5 of them. Now, there are other use cases that fall outside these themes, but this is where we're seeing a lot of different traction amongst our client set for blockchain. So they're about sustainability, provenance, how do you know where something is from, confidence, how do we bring confidence to our consumers, efficiency, like supply chain efficiencies, and then being a platform for convergent technology. And I'll go through each of these, talk about a smattering of examples that we have going into each of these key themes, and then what we've learned and how to get started. So the first one is sustainability. So with each passing day, we're reminded that we have only one planet, and consumers are not only asking that companies take better care of the environment, they're wanting to ensure that the products that's being sourced and being produced are responsible and aligned to their value system. And the best part about it is consumers are willing to pay more. And so one of the other research pieces that we've done this year and last year was interview or survey 19,000 consumers around the world. So around 28 countries, we surveyed consumers from the age of 18 to 73, and we asked them about brands and the ones they trust. And 1 in 3 consumers will actually stop purchasing from a brand if they don't trust it, if it doesn't align with their brand values. And so this is where blockchain comes in, and where we're seeing a lot of traction with different client sets. They're really trying to do things that are impacting sustainability efforts. I'll talk about 3 of these. One is work done by an organization or company called Tenet. And they're looking at electricity. So in Europe, for example, 27% of all electricity by 2030 is going to be renewably sourced. So it's coming from solar and wind power. And these energy sources, unlike coal and nuclear, you can't just turn it on and expect a consistent supply. So it goes, there's a certain trough and supply side to this that changes dynamically. And more often we have consumers who are being inputs to the power grid. So they're providing the power in terms of solar, having solar farms in case of small farmers, in other situations, solar panels on roofs, and then with cars, they can actually plug in the car into the grid to provide electricity back to it. So what we're seeing is blockchain is acting as that virtual power plant to look at the supply side and demand side to appropriately provide electricity when it needs to be. Another example is with Newlight. So Newlight's an interesting one. They actually take carbon gas from landfill sites, from old mines like coal mines, from farms, and they're able to take carbon, so these greenhouse gases, and then convert it into a different biodegradable molecule that can be used in place of fibers and plastics. And so in this situation, they really wanted blockchain. They wanted a way of sharing with their stakeholders the impact they're having. We see many brands actually that's trying to put a stake in the ground and say they're going to 0% emissions or having a certain footprint. Well, how do they track that, and how is it auditable? In this situation, we're using blockchain as that auditable record keeping. And the third story here is about coffee. So in many coffee producing countries, the price or cost of producing our coffee is actually greater than the price of coffee. So coffee farmers are switching industries, or they're just switching the crops they're planting altogether. And so how do we create a bond between farmers who are engaging in sustainable practices and then consumers? And that's where we have Farmer Connect, and they're working with large coffee organizations to connect the consumer directly to the farmer. And what you're able to do is scan a QR code. It could actually be on your cup. What we've done is we have QR codes that we place on coffee cups. You can scan it and actually see where it's coming from, and the farm that it's coming from is sustainably sourced, so they're doing sustainable methods. And you can provide a tip back to that farmer, or you can contribute back to the community. So you can actually provide tips to certain programs like reforestation efforts in communities that are engaged in sustainable coffee practices. So these are some examples of the work that our clients or business partners are leading in terms of sustainability and blockchain. Okay, so we're coming up near noon. How well do we know the food that we eat? It's one of the most important questions we could ask ourselves, but how often do we really ask it? In our food system today, we know about 1 in 5 seafood samples are mislabeled worldwide. I'm from New York City. The number is actually 43%. No one ever asked me out to sushi or anything else because I'm always the bearer of bad news that I'm not sure I know what I'm going to get. In this room, 1 in 10 of us will probably get sick from eating something that's contaminated. And so understanding where something is coming from is truly important. And that's, I think many of you may know, that's where we started our journey with blockchain, is with food and food provenance. And the reason that it works so well is because in today's transactions that we engage in, it's very much point to point. So you have all these different members in your supply chain interacting with each other, each of them keeping different ledgers and having different systems. In our blockchain world, and what we're doing with things like Food Trust, we have that many-to-many interactions where individuals or these organizations are uploading data via the cloud. They're in control of their own data, but it can be shared in a permission way with an ecosystem. And so by doing this, you now have access to information that you never did, at least not as quickly. And so when something happens, like a food recall incident, what typically happens is you start calling people. You start printing out sheets of paper to figure out this giant puzzle of where did something come from. With blockchain, and what our clients do now is they can look to the blockchain to help them figure out where this information is coming, because it's now available at their fingertips. And so when I talk about this to people, they don't really get the sheer volume and complexity of the global supply chain. So what I've done is the FDA in 2018, they released a traceback diagram. And this diagram shows the different steps in the supply chain from the point of service, like a retailer, all the way back to the farm. And you see that all these different points here are different members transacting goods along the supply chain to get where it needs to go to a consumer. And you see how complex this can be. So this process can take days, weeks, months. Sometimes it's almost impossible to solve it. And with blockchain, obviously you have this information now available, so it's much easier to get to the answer of where something came from. So there's really an art of salesmanship in marketing. The way that a product or service looks, the pictures it takes, there are a lot of claims. So how do you really know what's behind a particular product? And that's where consumer confidence comes in. And we are seeing a whole host of different clients of ours really work in terms of consumer confidence and providing the confidence to the consumer. And it matters. There's this trust loop that happens, and consumers are demanding trust these days. It's the same study I recorded before, where we asked 19,000 consumers around the world questions about brand choice. And one of the biggest things you can do as a brand is transparency. So because of blockchain, no surprise there, blockchain is being used to provide more transparency, to engage our consumers and provide them that trust that they're demanding. And so I'll give you a couple of examples here. We have a large healthcare provider that's streamlining their healthcare data. And so they're providing data that converges their clinical information about someone. It provides the information about the cost, and it provides information, so that's the admin side, as well as the data that they need to inform the kinds of decisions they need to make. In today's world, it's sometimes difficult to provide accurate information about a patient to particular healthcare providers. In the blockchain world, the work that we're doing, it provides more easy access and more controlled access to that patient to have a more patient-centered care. The other thing it does is it provides transparency in terms of the cost. A lot of times the cost is unknown to consumers, and with this blockchain network that we have going, the cost is more readily available to those consumers. Another way that we have to instill confidence is through what certain retailers are doing around the world. So we have Carrefour. It's a large French retailer. It's based out of Paris or France. And what they're doing is they have certain products on our blockchain that they're showing information to consumers in a store. So an example here is having boxes of muesli, which is a mashed potato mix from Nestle. It's in their stores, so consumers can scan that box, understand the potato composition, that it's all French potatoes, because the French really love mashed potatoes that come from France. And it also shows the farms it's coming from and the different checkpoints, so they can see the different quality assurance checkpoints along the way. And so what Carrefour has gone on the record is in terms of sharing the fact that consumers are buying more of this product, are engaging with the product more because of that transparency. And so we are starting to see a lot more organizations choosing to showcase transparency. Efficiency is a big topic. I've been on in some talks today and yesterday, and it keeps coming up. So I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But imagine if you can reduce some of those friction points in business, so we can do things faster, smarter, and at a reduced cost. And blockchain helps us remove some of those friction points. And there are 3 of them in particular. One is about supplier onboarding, another inventory management, and then trade finance. So with supplier onboarding, this is a network that we have called Trust Your Supplier. It's basically like a digital passport that suppliers have, that it can have their information and share it across the different buyers. And what it's doing is it's really simplifying the onboarding process in terms of the authentication, validation of the work of that supplier. Because with suppliers, there's certain information that particular buyers need to see. So it's decreasing the time for onboarding by 70%, reducing costs by 50%, and then for the supplier, it's actually reducing the redundancy and time to update their buyer profiles by 90%. We have the resolutions of disputes with inventory management. So here, if someone ships, let's say 100 cases of something and I get 80 in my warehouse, who's right? Are they right or am I right? And so I think we heard just before some about this inventory management dispute resolution process. And we have companies like Home Depot working with us today to solve some of those disputes. Now, the disputes, in terms of volume or percentage of their time involved in dispute resolution, it's really just about 2%, but it's huge volumes they're dealing with, which is really causing their people to focus backward-looking versus forward-looking. And then the third aspect is on trade financing. So this is work that we're doing with WeTrade. And so how do you access capital for your business? So we have 16 major banks in Europe, and they're all involved in WeTrade. And what happens is that if you want to sell your goods to someone else in a different country, there are two problems here. For the seller, how do you know you're going to get a payment, right? Especially if you're dealing with a transaction partner you've never dealt with before. And for the buyer, you need to put up money in advance, perhaps without getting the goods. And so WeTrade facilitates that process, provides the trust, so that for the buyer, they can have different payment terms, and then for the seller, they're assured that they will get payment when they transact their goods. The last theme that we're seeing, and this is more recently, is the convergence. I think one of the things that surprises people is how much of data is really unlocked for the world. 20%. 20% of the world's data is searchable. That means 80% is locked within silos of organizations. So each of our organizations has a tremendous amount of data, except it's not shared and we can't unlock its value. And of course, that's where blockchain comes in, because now we can share data in a permission way so we can unlock the value that's behind our different supply chains or different business models. So what we're seeing is that different organizations are using our blockchain as the foundational element to keep certain data points, like from Internet of Things, like IoT, RFIDs, and with edge computing. And they're using that data for new analytics and with artificial intelligence to get insights that they never had before, because they've always looked at their own organization, and now they can look at things across multiple organizations for additional insight. So based on a lot of the works from our clients, so we have 150 plus in production networks, we've learned a few things. One is in terms of business value. This is not a game where one person wins it. You have to look at business value for your entire network. And so the value that each participant gets may be different, but it has to be positive. Governance is very important. So what's the rules of the road? Does the convener of the network own the data? Do they get to sell it? Can they look at it? With IBM, at least, we ensure that data privacy is paramount. If you own the data before data upload, you retain the right for that data afterward. IBM or others cannot sell your data or use it in a way that's inconsistent with how you wanted us to use it in the first place. So that's something that's very important to get off the ground and to have a system to evolve it as your network grows. The third piece is the standards and interoperability. So if you're trying to have an ecosystem that connects with multiple different types of organizations, you need to ensure that you're able to interoperate with the different IT systems, or what if they don't have IT and they just have a smartphone, like on a farm? What do you do? And so this is a piece that work that I think keeps us up at night to ensure that we interoperate with various ERP systems, but also allow some of the different people from around the world to also interact with our blockchain. Then standards is a critical part of this, ensuring that we speak a similar language. So GS1 is used for us for certain networks that we have. It's definitely a standard body that we partner with. And then lastly, as you see here, I put technology last, although it's very critical. If you have your mission critical data running through blockchain, you need to ensure that it's scalable, it's secure, resilient, and it's open at an enterprise grade level. So these are the 4 major points I would say we've learned as we look through the different networks that we've deployed. And also, people sometimes get stuck with how to get started. They think they need to build their own solution. I think that's just one way of getting started amongst many. I just have 4 here. But the quickest way of getting started is joining a network. There's probably a network doing something that you're already interested in. And they have probably already proven out the use case. And you can do what you need to add value to that network to get what you really want to accomplish quicker. So joining a network is one of the best, easiest ways, and sometimes most cost-effective ways to get started to learn about it. The second option is building your own. It's kind of like with Lego blocks. You build your own solution. And if you have the right expertise in your team, you can certainly do that. And the third, a lot of companies are doing this with us, is co-creating that solution with us. And so really understanding the pain points, having the industry partnerships to create that solution. And then lastly, we have different business partners who are helping us with hardware, software, and also even with some of the consulting powers. So partnering is also a great option. And some of the stories or use cases I told you about do involve some of our business partners. So this is just a high-level overview showing you the themes that are emerging from our portfolio. Again, they're around themes of sustainability, provenance, consumer confidence, and then that platform for converging technologies so that your data is on one trusted platform. And I'm really curious about where we're going next. And so hopefully at our next meeting, we'll have an update in terms of the themes for blockchain and blockchain use and adoption. And I know we're a little over time here, so if any questions or you want to meet me or any part of our team, we're at the IBM booth upstairs. So thank you.